they be burned. The only ones that's ever ordered the Bible to be burned are those that hated it. I wonder if it's ever been explained how many passages in the Quran, and it is a beautiful book. Literarily, it's unequaled. But how many stories were plagiarized from Jewish fables and folklore? I wonder. I want to look for a moment at the alleged contradictions or variations found in the Word of God. And from this, I want to prove to you that this is the Word. In 2 Samuel 24:4 and 1 Chronicles 21:1, it mentions that God provoked David. 2 Samuel, Satan provoked David. 1 Chronicles, it seems like a contradiction. Of course, anyone that studies the Word of God knows that God is said to do things oftentimes that He only allows to be done. To be honest with you, there's evidence in the Quran that the same thing was done by God. I want to say that again. There's no contradiction here. God oftentimes, in the Old Testament especially, is placed in a position of being responsible for something when He only allows it to be done. And in reality, He is responsible in effect when you think of that. In 1 Kings 4:26, it speaks of 40,000 stalls, Solomon's grandeur. 2 Chronicles 9:25, 4,000 stalls, relating the same incident, and we would have to think, isn't that a contradiction? It is. Plain, pure, and simple. It relates the same story. There are several incidents in the Word of God stating the same identical thing in various different ways, where one account will be given and the number will be slightly changed. Another account will be given, it'll say 2,000, and then 2 Chronicles or 1 Chronicles 3,000 or whatever. In St. John 8, verses 1 through 11, it tells the story of the woman taken in adultery. And some say that was not in the original text. It's an imposition. It's a corruption. However, the Bizet Volket, the Jerusalem Syriac, the Mythonite, and the Ethiopic, and the early church fathers say that it was in the early manuscripts. And those manuscripts, they were manuscripts and they contained them. There are some lettering in the Word of God, 2 Kings 19 and Isaiah 37, that's identical. The chapters are identical, word for word. Why? If God gave it, would He have repeated Himself? Why not? Jesus repeated Himself at times. In the Quran, in Surah 32 and 5, it mentions 1,000 years. In Surah 70 and 4, it mentions 50,000 years. A day is as 1,000 years, a day is as 50,000. Is it a contradiction? Here is what I'm telling you. If this was a corrupted text, if it was an impostor, if it was fraudulent, don't you think the frauds would have removed these alleged contradictions from the Word of God? Have you ever stopped to think about that? They left it there, laboriously slaving over the text to make certain they put it exactly as the manuscript said it, translated from the Hebrew and the Greek. So what happened? If it's the Word of God, why would those contradictions be there? Well, it's a little bit simple. They didn't have Xerox copiers in those days. They didn't have computers. They had to copy them by hand. And copyists sometimes made mistakes. And I think our brothers in Islam will agree with that. In the genealogy, in Matthew and Luke, in Matthew, it gives Joseph's genealogy, and in Luke, it gives Mary's genealogy.